Hello, my fellow strawmen, and welcome back to the Fields of Hay. Today I want to address an argument not for God, but for faith in God, Pascal's wager. It's a bad argument, but I want to give it a fair shot anyways. It's one of the more common reasons that I hear for having faith, so I think it's important for me to have a reference video breaking down what I see as its flaws. Pascal's wager is meant to be applied to someone agnostic, who in the absence of any evidence would instead rely on game theory to make a decision that seems the most likely to turn out the best. It is based on a true dichotomy. Either God exists or not. Should one believe in God and turn out to be wrong, they only lose out on their finite life. But if they turn out to be right, then they stand to gain infinitely in the afterlife. On the other hand, if one doesn't believe in God and is right, they only gain finite rewards in this life. But if wrong, they stand to face an eternity of punishment. The choice is clear to Pascal: believe in God. But I find the choice to go the opposite way. Let me first give a few critiques of the wager, and then I'd like to present my own. First is the conflation between God and reward in the afterlife. Pascal assumes that God's existence necessarily means there is judgment after life. Of course, to Pascal, God was synonymous with Jesus, who promised eternal life to any who believed in him. But the wager simply leaves out the possibility that God could be any other conception. What about Allah, or Odin, or Brahma? What about the possibility of a hidden God who doesn't really fit with the ideas of any of the world religions? What if there is an afterlife without a God, and judgment is passed by our own souls due to regrets or accomplishments in life? Pascal may have lived amongst Christians, but that doesn't mean an agnostic should consider Christianity to be the only possibility. The second issue I have is that, although the wager is presented as choosing between belief in a God or not, it is really driving at the underlying decision of whether or not to accept faith as a valid standard for belief. Since the wager is aimed at agnostics, faith here is choosing to believe in something despite lacking convincing evidence. Do you have faith and believe that God exists for no reason other than the wager? Or do you reserve belief until and if you find evidence? The choice isn't really about whether you believe God exists or not. It's about whether or not to believe by faith. It's an important distinction because it's possible God would know if our beliefs are insincere, and perhaps he wants us to believe in him for a good reason, not just by faith. Finally, the wager presents faith in God as something which would meaningfully raise the probability of receiving a heavenly reward. But this is only true if judgment is based on faith and if you choose the right faith. What if judgment is based not on the faith you hold to, but on the actions you take during your life on earth? And even if faith is the standard by which we will be judged, how do you know whether the religious teachings you hold faith in are the right teachings? When you choose your beliefs by faith, how do you find any comfort in your expectations about the afterlife, when deep down, you know they're just a shot in the dark? My solution to these problems comes in the form of a counter wager. I'll consider the possibilities that there is or isn't an afterlife, and that in that afterlife, judgment is by faith or by action. I'm not considering the possibilities that there is an afterlife without judgment, or one with unfair judgment, because if either of these is true, then any decisions on our part don't really matter. The choice I have is whether or not to base my beliefs in the afterlife and God on faith. Should I accept faith when the reality is that there is no afterlife? Then my faith was false and my worldview based on false beliefs. But if there is an afterlife and judgment is based on faith, then I get the heavenly rewards. This sounds great, except that it's still a numbers game, and I only get that reward if I have chosen the right faith, while hell still awaits me if I choose wrong. And if it is action that we are judged on, I run the same risk as anyone of not knowing what the standards for those actions should be. But I add on to that the risk of following immoral commands I falsely believe to be of divine origin. But if I reject faith and withhold my belief in an afterlife or God, then I would be correct in the case that there is no afterlife, and at least that part of my worldview would be well founded. If I am wrong and there is an afterlife and I need faith for judgment to go pleasantly, then I stand no chance. This is without a doubt the worst possible outcome on the table. But to finish the table, judgment based on actions comes with the same risk that I don't know which actions will be judged well and which will be judged poorly. But at least it forces me to be honestly introspective and consider the value of my actions myself, rather than pass on those moral decisions to something else. If I find evidence of God, I can believe in him and behave accordingly. And if I find no evidence, I can search for moral standards that hold up to scrutiny. In this way, I think that I am far more likely to earn a good judgment if I don't let faith rule my beliefs. To me, it is clear that faith should be rejected. If you find yourself to be an agnostic, then you shouldn't see any reason why the universe owes you more than the life it's given you. The most likely outcome is that there is no afterlife, and in that case, faith fails. If there is an afterlife and it is just, then justice is more precisely achieved if judgment is based on action, and again, faith fails here. It isn't that rejecting faith guarantees anything, but it has a better chance of encouraging you to be honest with yourself and try to grow as a person. Faith, on the other hand, is stubborn. It is choosing to be confident about the nature of reality in a way that one has no right to be confident about. Faith only works if faith is the defining feature that separates good from evil on the day of judgment. And even then, only if you pick the right one. It is lunacy to believe. It is a good idea to use faith as a basis for one's belief. I think that if there is no afterlife, then living without faith will lead me to seek deeper truths and find more purpose in the finite time I have. And if there is an afterlife, then living without faith stands a better chance of proving to the judge that I am willing to put the effort into understanding what makes things right or wrong, that I am brave enough to stand up for what I think is right, and humble enough to accept corrections when I am wrong. As a mere human who doesn't need to pretend to know everything about the universe, I think that rejecting faith is the most honest option. I'm curious who would take me up on my wager. I am a Gnostic atheist, and so I can't even take my own wager seriously. I'm too biased. I only made it as a counterpoint to Pascal's. But for any agnostics watching, do you agree with me that faith ought be rejected? Why or why not? I look forward to hearing your responses, and regardless of whether you agree with me, don't forget to go read a fucking book.